This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform where creatives can stand out with their online presence. You can kind of see the potential of this cardigan. This is what it is so far. Who would have thought my custom fit sock would fit really well? Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Knee Knits. My name is Amy, and here I talk about all things knitting. And today's podcast, episode number 36, where I'll be sharing what I've been knitting for the past few weeks. In today's episode, I have a bunch of project updates for you all. The projects I'm working on right now are very varied in terms of yarn and type of project, so really excited to show you all what I've been working on. I do have one finished object to share, as well as 2 new cast-ons at the end as well. So I'm going to start the episode with my finished object, and they are my Hibernal Socks. This is a pattern by Summer Lee, and I had finished the first sock in the previous episode, and I was working on the second sock, and now I have my finished pair of socks. The Hibernal Socks are a top-down sock pattern that feature ribbing with some mock cables for a very streamlined, kind of sophisticated basic sock, and it has a heel flap and gusset and a wedge toe at the end. And the yarn that I used for mine is a yarn from Night Bright Yarn Co. It is their bright sock base in the color Seashells, which was gifted to me, and it's this beautiful sort of corally orange variegated with a little bit of speckling as well. I had a lot of fun knitting these socks. I really liked the pattern. It was really easy to memorize, and it was enough of a pattern where it was engaging and fun, but it wasn't too complicated where I kind of dreaded picking up the pattern or picking up the project, which sometimes I find with complicated sock patterns. Sometimes they're just a little too complicated, but this was the perfect mix of engaging but still basic, and I really like how they came out. I'm a huge fan of mock cables on socks because I find that using a cable needle with sock yarn is just not my favorite thing to do. So you don't need any sort of cable needle for this. It's just done with the yarn overs and sort of like a decrease and stuff like that. And it made a really cute sock. I did mention in the last episode that I think if I were to knit these again, I probably wouldn't choose as variegated as a yarn because it does kind of take away from the patterning, but they look really good regardless. I think they look really good on the feet. I did kind of like a mid-ankle length. I did not do like a full-length leg, and it's not really a true shorty sock either. It's kind of in the middle, so it kind of pokes out when I'm wearing sneakers, which I think is kind of fun, and you know, it allowed the project to be finished a little bit faster than if I did a full length leg. I have worn these already once. I think I wore them to work for like a full day with some sneakers, and you can see here already how the heel is kind of like not felted completely, but it's really sort of flattened and kind of like molded to where I was wearing them, and they've kind of stretched out to my foot shape. You can see here there's like some stretching at the gusset and at the toe as well, but I really enjoyed wearing them. This is a 4-ply sock yarn, so pretty sturdy. You know, it did kind of wear in a little bit at the heel, but it's not like pilling and it's not super fuzzy, which I like. I really like how smooth the stockinette stitches look and the ribbing. I do plan on knitting them again. I feel like this is a really good kind of giftable sock pattern because it involves ribbing, and I find that when you're giving socks away to people where you might not have super exact measurements of their foot, having ribbing in a sock can really help with making sure that they have a good fit with their final socks. Would love to knit these in maybe a more neutral color. I feel like they'd look really cute with my Birkenstock sandals, so big thumbs up for the Hibernal Socks. Before we get into my works in progress, I do want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. I'm super excited to be working with them to create an all-new Knee Knits website. It's super easy to create your own website from scratch. You don't need to know complicated coding or design. With Squarespace, you can sell digital products like knitting patterns, you can create an email newsletter for your subscribers, and you can also customize your website exactly how you want it with Squarespace's new feature, Squarespace Blueprint. With Squarespace Blueprint, you can easily drag around all the little items on your website precisely to where you want them to create the exact look that you're going for. I've talked a lot about working on creating the website with Squarespace, and I did want to let you all know that it is almost finished, so I'm looking forward to sharing you all the final website when it is all published. But until then, if you want to try your own Squarespace website, head to squarespace.com to start a free trial today. Once you're ready to launch your own website, head to squarespace.com/kneenknits to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get into my works in progress. In this Knitting Swan project bag, which I do have a coupon code for in the description box, is my Kuutar wrap cardigan. This is a pattern by Sari Nordland, and I've been working on it pretty steadily, so it's almost finished, which I'm really excited to show you all. So the Kuutar wrap cardigan is a pattern by Sari Nordland. It's a top-down cardigan that features a lace panel going down each of the sides on the front, and it ties off with little I-cord belts that go around the waist. So I have been working on mine in the suggested yarn, which is 1 strand of knitting for olive merino and 1 strand of knitting for olive soft silk mohair. I'm using the color putty for both of these yarns and held together. You know, you got your standard merino and mohair combo. Now, I've really been enjoying working with this yarn and this combination. This is actually my first time working with knitting for olive merino, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a really smooth knit, and it just pairs really nicely with the mohair. And here is my cardigan so far. So you can see that I finished the body, I finished 1 sleeve, and now all I have left to do is the second sleeve, which is really like almost done. And here's a better view of the lace panel. It has a bunch of cascading kind of like diamonds or triangles that look really good. And this is unblocked, and I think this is gonna be one of those fabrics that really transforms once it's all blocked. You can see it's kind of scrunched up right now, but really pretty pattern. So the Kuutar wrap cardigan is knit at a larger gauge. It's knit on 5mm needles is the suggested needle size, and it's in 18 stitch gauge per 4 inches. So you get kind of like a looser, more flowy fabric. So it creates a lot of openness and a lot of drape, which you can see here. It's like not the most opaque fabric. It's a little bit see-through. There is some like gapping with my stitches, but it makes the project go by really quickly. And you can see all the progress that I have made thus far. I'll talk about the body first, because last time I had showed this, I had split for the armholes and then was working on the body. I had just finished the increases along the front panel, and so after you sort of bring in the front panels with increases, you then work straight without any increases to finish off the body. So it's just at that point before, and that's also the point where you're supposed to put a little hole in the side for the belt tie. One of the belt ties goes under the front panel and then through the hole and around the back. And you're supposed to put the hole at the same level where the increases end, which is for me right about here. Now, when I have that on my body, that kind of hit right at the underside of my bust, and I did not really want that to be where the belt ties went around my body. I had seen that on Sari's sample photo and as well as some other project pages on Ravelry, and I just knew I didn't really want that. I definitely wanted the belt to sit a little bit lower and closer to my waist. So I chose to knit more of the body without increases, without doing the hole, until I got to a point where I felt like it would be a good placement for the belt as well as the belt hole. So that's what I have here. It's about 1.5 inches lower than what is suggested in the pattern. On me, it does hit right around my natural waist, and because I wanted this to be a cropped cardigan that sort of also ended around my natural waist, you can see I did not have much more knitting to do after that before casting off the body. So after you finish the body, you then go into 1x1 ribbing on a smaller needle size, and then I finished mine off with a sewn bind off. I did not do double knitting for a tubular bind off. I just simply went into the sewn bind off, and that's what it looks like. Pretty pleased with it. Again, I know a lot of this will sort of even out with blocking. Like right now, the ribbing is cinching in a bit. The lace, I feel like, isn't at its full potential, all sort of like scrunched up like this, but that's what it looks like right now. After finishing the body, I then went into the sleeve. You create sort of like a set-in sleeve shape for the armhole when you're knitting the body, which you can see there, how it goes straight down and then increases out at the bottom. So when you shape the top of the sleeve after picking up your stitches, you do a bunch of short rows, which sort of fills in that shape, and then you go into your standard decreased tapered sleeve. It was pretty similar to what I did in the stick season sweater to shape that sleeve as well. So pretty nice shaping. The one thing that I don't love though about this sleeve is at the back, there's some like stitch irregularity with where I was picking up the sleeve. And I think that's because when you shape the armholes in the body, the pattern tells you to slip the first stitch of every row, and slipping stitches of the first row, or slipping the first stitch of every row, usually ends up with like a larger, it looks neat, but it is like a larger stitch space than if you had just knit plain stockinette without slipping stitches. And it looked nice before I picked up for the sleeve, but then I realized how exaggerated these stitches looked now that they're picked up from compared to the rest of the body. And although it is like evenly spaced, I just don't like how it differs so much with the rest of the stitching. So I think if I were to do this again, I would not slip the stitches of each row, because then it would give me like a cleaner edge here instead of one with all this irregular stitch sizing. In this pattern, the finished cardigan has about a bracelet length sleeve. It's not a full length sleeve. I've talked a lot about how my sleeves I always have to shorten, so I actually knit this to pretty much the suggested length and then went into the ribbing, and I have a full length sleeve. I didn't really want it to be bracelet length on me, which would come up to about here, so I knit it to about here, and it will be just a standard full-length sleeve on me. This is what the cardigan looks like on, and of course it's unblocked, so a lot of things are kind of like bunched up. Like I think that this is dropping a little bit lower than it will once I block it. I think it'll sit closer to up here, and yeah, I think it looks pretty good. It looks pretty good with this green t-shirt. I didn't even think about wearing it with this green t-shirt, but so it'll sort of wrap around like this, and then I'll do the belt loops, and of course it's hard for me to stand fully at this angle, but you can kind of see the potential of this cardigan, and I'm really excited to finish it. I do plan on blocking it before adding the I-cords. I don't plan on blocking the I-cords. I think I'm just gonna knit them and, you know, give them a little tug so they stretch out a bit and then attach them. I don't really know if there's any big benefit to blocking an I-cord, but I definitely want to have this blocked to the measurements that it's gonna be when it's done before I knit the I-cord, so that way I can see exactly how long I should knit my I-cords to be a good length. So this is my Kuutar wrapped cardigan. Probably a finished object next episode. Can't wait. My next project is a full-length wool sweater, not a typical spring or summer knit, but it was something that I wanted to work on, and it's my DRK Everyday Sweater. I have been also steadily working on this. This is a top-down circular yoke sweater. It's a sport weight knit, and the suggested positive ease is about 2 to 4 inches. I'm knitting size 2 for myself, which should give me about 4 inches of positive ease. And this is my sweater so far. So the one thing that drew me to this pattern was that it was not an oversized garment. You guys know that I've knit my fair share of oversized garments, and I'm kind of ready to branch away from that. Specifically this year, I'm trying to explore more close-fitting garments and garments that just aren't really big everywhere. And the DRK Everyday Sweater, I just really like the silhouette of. It is a circular yoke, and it has a pretty shallow circular yoke. There's really not a lot of excess fabric around the underarms, at least from Andrea Mowry's sample photo, so I really wanted to get that similar look and fit with my sweater. Before I get into the details of what I've knit so far, I will say that the yarn that I'm using is Juniper Moon Farm's Patagonia Organic Merino. I do have a ball of it here, or a skein of it. This is the color Violet. It is a 100% organic merino yarn. It's a 2-ply. It has like a bit of a rustic feel. I wouldn't call this a rustic yarn, but if you're used to knitting with like Knitting for Olive Merino or Sandnes Garn Sunday, this definitely feels more rustic than those yarns, but I wouldn't classify this as an entirely rustic yarn. It just has a bit of texture and a little bit of tweediness and a little bit of thick and thin. Nothing dramatic, just a little bit when knitting with it. But I think it gives the finished fabric a lot of character. Here is the fabric up close. I really like how these stitches have been coming out. I am knitting this on 4mm needles, which allowed me to get gauge for the pattern, and it just creates a very velvety, slightly textured but still really soft fabric. And of course this purple color is really cute. So I have finished the yoke and I've since split for sleeves, which you can see here. Now the yoke looks very shallow, and it is a very shallow yoke, but like I said before, that was really what I wanted while knitting this. I didn't want to make it too long. I was really just gonna follow the pattern and try it on as I went and see how it fit. And I pretty much did knit this to pattern. I think I might have knit my yoke 1 or 2 rounds longer than what was suggested for my size, and I feel like as I was knitting it, I was like, there's no way this is gonna fit me. It's just me not being used to knitting closer fitting garments. I'm just used to patterns where by the time I split for sleeves, you know, the sweater is like somewhere down here and then I break off for sleeves. So it has a very good fit. I'll probably even try it on for you all, put in a clip to sort of show you how it fits so far. I think with blocking, it's gonna help even out the neck. And of course, once I attach the sleeves, it will sort of pull down the yoke a little bit as well. For all of my increase rounds within the circular yoke, I did make one lefts, I believe, for all of them, and I think it created a pretty smooth yoke. You can probably see some of the increase rings that I think the human eye just picks up pretty well, but besides that, I don't have any major holes or gaps with my increase rounds. I think it just looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with how this is looking, really happy with how this is feeling, and it's just been a really good mindless stockinette project to have in my rotation when I need a quick thing to knit on. I am planning on knitting mine to a similar length to Andrea Mowry's sample photo. Hers is very cropped. It has really long ribbing at the end of the body, so I think I'm not really gonna have too much stockinette to knit before I get to the ribbing, and then I'm gonna make it a cropped length, but I will do full length sleeves. And yeah, really enjoying this so far. Love the 2x2 rib details, love the yarn. Like, I would definitely want to use this yarn again in the future, maybe make the same pattern, I don't know. It's been really nice to work with. So there's my DRK Everyday Sweater. Now we're gonna get into my new cast-ons. And the first one is a pattern from Sari Nordland's book, Softly. I have cast on the Asopo Cardigan, which is a top-down drop shoulder cardigan. It's knit in a worsted weight yarn, and I have mine right here. Bet you weren't expecting to see this, because I was not expecting to see this when I casted on this sweater, or this cardigan, I should say. Very interesting construction, but for the basics of this sweater, I'm using Woolberry Fiber Co.'s Rambouillet worsted weight yarn, which is a 100% Rambouillet wool. This is the color It's Bread, which is kind of like a brown red color. This is a non-superwash yarn, and you can see it is a 2-ply, very thick and bouncy yarn. This is what it is so far, and I've never knit a cardigan with this style construction before. I have seen other knitters work on cardigans like this, where it's more of like a triangular shape that comes down the back and not like super rectangular that a lot of drop shoulders have. Now this cardigan also features a shawl collar that folds over at the back, so that has begun as well. You actually start with a provisional cast on with ribbing for the shawl collar. So this middle line here was actually where I cast on, and then I did ribbing on one side, and then I picked up the provisional cast on edge and then knit the other side. So you can see here there's a little bit of a jog where I did the provisional cast on. I think that's normal with provisional cast ons. I don't know if it's possible to get a fully aligned like rib with a provisional cast on. Either way, like this is right at the back of the neck, and it's a pretty like straight line, so I'm not worried about it. I think it'll look fine in the finished piece. And once you finish the specified length for the ribbed shawl collar, you can see here I have my stitches on hold, and then you pick up on this edge, and then I started the back shaping. And you can see I don't have my needles on here because I needed them for my Kuutar wrap cardigan, so it's kind of on pause for now, but I just finished one part of increasing for the back. I think I still have more increases to go, but something different is going to happen, so I thought that was a good point to stop, and this is what I have so far. I am knitting this on 4.5mm needles to meet gauge, and I really have been enjoying knitting with this yarn. I know I had mentioned I was unsure how I would like this 2-ply yarn because it does create a pretty textured stockinette stitch. It's not perfectly smooth like a 4-ply yarn would create. It definitely has more texture, but I think it knits up really well. Like the knitting process I like, it's not splitty at all, and I think the overall texture that the 2-ply yarn makes is pretty nice. I'm not gonna say it's my first choice for a yarn. I think in the future, you know, I wouldn't choose this over a 4-ply worsted weight yarn, but I don't dislike this fabric that it's creating. And I think it's gonna create a cool dimension of depth to the fabric that this cardigan otherwise would not have. And besides the 2-ply structure, you know, the feeling of the 100% rambouillet is really nice. It's super velvety. It kind of has like a matte finish. It's super soft and kind of like a brushed feeling as well. I am a big fan of the yarn. So Asopo Cardigan has begun. I feel like I'm not super motivated to work on this because it's a thick worsted weight wool cardigan and we're in the midst of spring. The weather here has been warmer than ever and it's getting me excited for summer. So I just don't really picture myself wearing this cardigan right away. And I know some other projects that I want to work on might have more timely deadlines with them compared to the weather. I don't know if I said that right, but you guys know what I mean. I probably won't be wearing a worsted weight cardigan a lot this summer, but I might be wearing a fingering weight t-shirt a lot this summer. So I have one, and that's my next project to share. And it is T number 1 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. I cast on T number 1. I also talked about casting this on last episode, so was very excited to get this on the needles. T number 1 by My Favorite Things Knitwear is a fingering weight top-down saddle shoulder t-shirt, and I am knitting mine in the suggested yarns. The suggested yarns are both Gepard yarns. And the first yarn is Gepard Wild and Soft. This is a blend of 40% wild Tussa silk and 60% merino. It's a 2-ply fingering weight yarn. This is the color Glacier. And I am holding it with Gepard cashmere lace, which was also called for in the pattern. This is a lace weight 100% cashmere yarn. This is the color New Wild Sky. And I have gotten a few questions about where I got this yarn. Gepard is very hard to find in the US. I think it's somewhat hard to find in Canada and the rest of North America. There are some Canadian retailers that sell it, but I think the cashmere lace is not sold anywhere by like an official retailer in the US. You might be able to find it on Etsy, but I got mine while I was in Oslo. I was traveling there and I knew Gepard is hard to get, so I made sure to pick some up while I was away, but unfortunately I have yet to find this in the US, so that is how I have this yarn. So I'm knitting size 2 for myself, which should give me 4 inches of positive ease, I believe, and I ended up using 3.75mm needles to get gauge, and I did switch to my wooden needles to help me get the row gauge as well, and the pattern calls for 3.5mm needles, so I'm not that far off. And I did finish the 2 shoulder panels. That's where you start in the pattern, and I kind of used them as my final gauge swatch. I had gauge swatched twice for this pattern already, and then I knew that this needle was most likely going to be the best fit for meeting gauge, so I just decided instead of gauge swatching for a 3rd time, I was just going to start the pattern, do the shoulder panels, and then block them, and then just verify that my gauge is good. The gauge is good, which is very exciting, and that's why these panels look so neat, because they have been fully blocked. So you start with the 2 rectangles and then you pick up along the back side of the 2 panels for the back. So what you're looking at is the back neck. So as if I was wearing the shirt, this is where I'm knitting right now. So you can see how these panels will create, you know, the saddle shoulder style that this t-shirt kind of is known for. And the back is shaped with short rows. So you can see the angle that's created there to give you some shaping. Hopefully you can see it. I think that shows it the best. There we go. So there's the back shaping, and I've really been enjoying the knit so far. I have heard some, not complaints, but maybe pickiness about how many ends you have to weave in, because you do break and reattach the yarn a lot in this project. I don't think I would have noticed had I not heard other people talk about it. I think I would have just thought, oh, that's what happens with the saddle shoulder construction. I don't know. I've done one other saddle shoulder construction pattern before, and that is the Riley tee. And I remember that one also had a lot of breaks and rejoins of the yarn with all of the shoulder construction. So I don't think it's too bad. I'll probably take a break one day and weave in all the ends before I get too deep into the pattern, just so I don't have a bajillion ends to weave in at the end. I am really enjoying knitting with this yarn combination. It feels really nice. I have not knit with any form of like 100% cashmere before, and I feel like it's kind of similar to holding this with a silk mohair, because when I like touch the fabric, I feel like I'm only feeling the cashmere, and it does kind of give it like a fuzziness at the top of the fabric, which you might be able to see. It kind of gives like a little bit of a halo. Obviously, it's not like a long stranded kind of mohair halo kind of thing, but it definitely has more texture than if I didn't use the cashmere lace. It's also very drapey, which I really like. You can kind of see the fabric flying around in the air. It definitely has a lot of drape from the silk. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how this tee knits up and how the whole fabric kind of lays as it grows. And I think it's going to be pretty nice to wear in like the spring and the fall. I'm not really expecting a t-shirt that has merino and cashmere in it to be super wearable in like the middle of summer, but you know, transitional days or colder days in the summer, I think this will get some good use out of. I've cast on a vanilla pair of socks, but not just any vanilla pair of socks. I am making my perfect fit custom socks. So I've talked about wanting to find the best fitting sock formula for myself, and I never really got past the point of just playing around with initial stitch count. I would just change my stitch count from the vanilla sock pattern by the Crazy Sock Lady. Like I've done 64 stitches, I've done 56 stitches, I've done 60 stitches, and I was like, all right, 60 stitches seems to be the best, so I'm just gonna go with that. But I kind of knew that there could be more potential to customize a sock for my foot. And I never really thought that my socks didn't fit well. I like the way my socks fit, but you know, I just knew there was more. And in the month of March, I think it was the month of March, hopefully I'm not wrong, but March was National Craft Month, and Penguin Publishing reached out to me offering a free book of my choice for National Craft Month, just because I've worked with them before, so it's kind of just like a thank you gift, no requirement to, you know, post any content about it. And I got my choice of books, and this is what I selected. Custom Knit Socks, or Custom Socks Knit to Fit Your Feet by Kate Atherley. And I got this book in the mail, and then I kind of put it in my bookshelf and didn't really read it. I flipped through it and I was like, oh, that's a lot of words, and then didn't read it. And then I got back into sock knitting. As you all know, I got Summer Lee's sock book, and she actually recommends this book in her sock book, which I was like, wait a minute, I have that book, as I was reading Summer Lee's sock book. So then I went to this book and I was like, I should read this book. Really cool resource. Now, if you don't know, I'm an engineer full-time. I've always loved math and science. This book, if you love math or if you like math, this is just a huge encyclopedia of formulas based on custom measurements of your foot to create the perfect fitting sock pattern. And it has you start with measuring a bunch of different parts of your foot and your leg. You follow this diagram. You take down your measurements, and it walks you through calculating all these different ratios of different parts of your foot. Like you do your foot length to your foot circumference ratio, you do the ankle circumference based on your lower leg circumference ratio, and this book walks you through telling you whether or not your ratios fit standard sock measurements or if they don't. And if you are wondering what I mean by standard sock measurements, you're probably thinking what I'm thinking, which is not many people have standard sized feet. Everyone's feet and legs are shaped super differently, super specifically. So you can imagine it's hard for a singular sock pattern to cover every single nuance that you could have with your specific measurements. So this book walks you through using all of those measurements to calculate your exact sock pattern for your feet based on your knitting gauge. I forgot to mention that. But once you have your measurements and you have your knitting gauge, you can calculate everything. So that's what I did. It was kind of a lot of fun to do. There's a lot of different case studies in here and a lot of different like specific scenarios that really help you narrow down where you need to adjust all the different aspects of knitting your sock. So this is a result of my custom fit sock pattern. Basic differences from my custom fit sock versus a standard vanilla sock that I've been knitting for a while now. I did find out based on my measurements in the book that I need to have a different stitch count for my leg versus my foot. I also found out that I have what's considered like a low arch or a shallow gusset. So I need to adjust the amount of rows that I knit in the heel flap to give myself a tighter fit around the gusset. So you can see here my heel flap looks very shallow, probably compared to what you're used to, but this is what fits my measurements. And I also knit these socks to a 10% negative ease, which I realized I have not been doing before. I've never really calculated how much ease my socks had as I was knitting them. I would always gauge whether or not they fit based on if I just liked how they felt when I put them on. And it was kind of funny when I took out my ruler and then measured all of my past socks that I like wearing. They have like a 20 to 30% amount of negative ease. Like we're talking 2 to 3 inches of negative ease around my foot. Now this book, all of the formulas that it gives is based off of a 10% negative ease because that's what it recommends as the suggested ease of your sock. So I put this poll on Instagram asking sock knitters what their suggested or what their preferred negative eases in socks. I didn't do it by percentage. I did it by measurement, like 0 to 1 inch or 1 to 2 inches and then 2 to 3 inches. And I fall in the 2 to 3 inch category based on my past socks. The majority of you all voted for 1 inch or about 1 inch, like 0 to 1 inch. So I was like, wow, are my socks just like crazy tight? But I like wearing them. So it kind of made me like scratch my head and wonder why I like wearing socks that are so tight when this expert sock book is telling me that my socks are too tight. So I was like, all right, let me just try knitting a sock at 10% negative ease to see how I like it. And if I don't like it, I can recalculate all of my numbers based on like 20% negative ease. Wouldn't be too hard to go back and do that. So this has 10% negative ease and it actually led me to a lot larger of a stitch count than normal. So I have 76 stitches in my foot compared to what I thought was my preferred 60 stitch foot, which seemed wild to me. But I was like, all right, this is an experiment. I trust the math. I'm gonna see how it goes. So finishing one sock, I tried it on and I was like, wow, these actually fit really well. Who would have thought my custom fit sock would fit really well? I have not worn these for a day. You can see I have one. My second one is right here. So I don't have both. I'm not gonna like wear one sock without having the other one, but I am really curious to see how this will wear throughout the day because socks kind of stretch out and I'm worried that if I like my tight socks and this is not as tight, is it gonna like stretch out throughout the day to the point where it's like super loose? But one major thing that I noticed when wearing this sock as opposed to my other socks that I knit is that I do not have a lot of stretching around the gusset. When I put on my socks on my feet, the ones that are a lot smaller, there is a lot of stretching of the stockinette stitch around my ankle circumference. So I found that this calculation of the heel flap specific to my measurements really helped have like an even flow of fabric around my foot. Like there's no point where it's super loose and there's no point where it's super tight. So I kind of liked that. So once I finish the second sock, I definitely want to give these full day wear tests, see how they stretch out with the day, see how, you know, if they fall down my leg or feel loose at any point since they are so much bigger than my other socks. But really cool learning experience with this book. If you like math and numbers, this might be a fun exercise for you to go through. Oh, I didn't even talk about the yarn that I used. Yikes. Okay, so this yarn, so this is one of Arcane Fiberworks Merino sock yarns. This is the color Blessed Bluebird, a beautiful sort of watercolory variegated that created this really nice fabric. These are my favorite kind of hand-dyed variegated yarns, the ones that just kind of like create a watercolor of fabric. And then for the accents, I used some leftover Felcolana Arwetta. I don't remember the color. It's like an army green. I just had it in like my sock scrap yarn basket. And funny thing, I did not like knitting with the Filcolana Arwetta. It was super splitty. The way I was knitting it, it would like flatten out on the needle and all of the different strands would separate. So it was super splitty for me. I have given Filcolana Arwetta pretty high praise before, but my only experience knitting with it was holding it double in an Oslo hat. I've never knit it single for socks, and now that I've knit with it single for socks, I'm like a little worried about the splittiness of it, but it did create a nice smooth fabric. Both of the yarns are 4-ply, which I really like in socks, and I did mess up with the ribbing. I decided to, when I added my main color, I continued the ribbing in pattern before switching to stockinette, which gave me this weird thing going on, and I never do that. I don't know why I did that. You should always knit your row after ribbing so you don't get, if you don't want this like purl bumps to stick out, always knit your first row when you connect a new color. But that's okay. It wasn't bothering me enough to go back and redo it, so I'll fix it on my other sock so it doesn't do that. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you all so much for joining me today. And if you like what you saw, feel free to subscribe. I post podcast videos once every 2 weeks to update you all on my projects. I'm also on Instagram at any_knits if you want to follow along with my projects there. I'll have everything I talked about linked below in the description box, linked to my Ravelry page as well. And looking forward to seeing you all in the next video.